The situation in China is increasingly becoming worse, with hospitals, crematoriums overwhelmed. China has time and again lied about the virus from its origin, spread to control measures. As the cases rise exponentially and the spillover impact of the virus looms, the big question is, will China be held for this catastrophe at all? Sanjeev Srivastava, foreign affairs expert, is joining us live. We also have Dr. Deepak Vora, former diplomat, live with us. Professor Madhav Nalapat is also joining us live, editorial director, I presume, of the Sunday Guardian. Let's complete that designation. And we also have Sanjeev Bagai, Chairman, Nephron Clinic, with us. Let me begin with you first, Sanjeev Srivastava. Your view on the evolving situation with China, the frightening pictures coming out, and will they ever be held accountable for bringing this virus to the world? Sanjeev Srivastava, can you hear me? Okay, we seem to have lost that connection with Sanjeev Srivastava. Let me bring in Dr. Deepak Vora. Are you able to hear me, Dr. Deepak Vora?
Hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay, Dr. Deepak Vora, your take on, of course, the the fact that many are wondering as to whether China will ever be held accountable. Will someone bring them to book or not?
Thank you very much, sir. It's always a pleasure, Mr. Singh, to be with you on NewsX, to learn from you, from Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, one of the best doctors in the world, and of course, Professor Madhav Nalapat, whose knowledge is amazing. You've asked a very interesting question: will they ever be held to account? Who's going to bring them to account? There used to be a racket called the United Nations. I don't know if it's still alive, Professor Nalapat. You can guide me on it. They can't do anything. Then there was that Fauci character who went around saying, no, there's no human-to-human transmission. Then China's son-in-law, another crook who runs that World Health Organization, he also went around playing along with what Ping Pong was saying, changing his statements ever so often. So who's going to bring them to book? The fact is, sir, let me put it very bluntly, people died because China lied. And now the virus has come back to work from home. It's afflicting China. China will never acknowledge that it's its fault. The virus, where it's come from, it came from Pluto, it came from Mars, it came from Venus. But they will never acknowledge that it was the Wuhan nonsense that created it. Evidence is mounting by the day. But accountability, with all these fellows having their fingers in the pie, their hand in the till, I doubt if there will be accountability. The best thing that can happen, China, as this Ping Pong character, has messed up his country with zero COVID. The best I can wish for the Chinese people is zero Ping Pong. Let him go. Do the world a favor, sir.
Yes, Madhav Nalapat, let me quickly bring you in here, because obviously China is in the news once again and could once again spread COVID across the world. India is worried, so are many other countries, looking at this surge, looking at the frightening pictures coming out of China, and there is a lack of transparency as always.
Well, I'd like to say that, taking off from where Ambassador has spoken, the WHO, unfortunately, was nothing but a ventriloquist dummy for the Chinese Communist Party. Unfortunately, whatever they said was basically repeating what the Communist Party had asked them to say. And I'm really amazed that an institution of the United Nations can be anyone's dummy. Least of all the dummy of the country in which the virus took root in that particular laboratory. It's now more or less acknowledged that that particular virus originated in the lab in Wuhan. It was part of an experiment which unfortunately went wrong. Now that caused a tremendous amount of damage. The Chinese authorities were so lackadaisical about the virus that they allowed tens of thousands of flights to leave China during the time when they were aware that this virus was all over the world. So, you have heard about spreading happiness across the world. This is the first time I've heard about spreading viruses across the world. But that's exactly what happened. So, having said that, I'd like to say that it's extremely unfortunate that the people of China are undergoing this torment, both in terms of what the authorities' reaction is and in terms of whatever effect this virus has got. But I'd like to say, Uday, I don't think we should ever get hysterical once again the way we got in 2020. The whole world became hysterical, absolutely hysterical. It was good news for some companies that produce the vaccine. Incidentally, one of the best vaccines was produced in India, and I think the Chinese authorities told the WHO, don't allow this vaccine to be authorized. So this vaccine was not authorized, but you look at the statistical data, and I'd like to say mathematical statistics was one of my foundation subjects, you will see that this vaccine has performed brilliantly when compared to the Chinese vaccine, which of course the WHO was a champion of, the Chinese vaccine. So, and I'm told that that particular company has now produced a nasal vaccine as well. So quite frankly, it's very important to understand that we must not get into a second round of panic. The Chinese can do what they like. Mr. Xi Jinping is absolute dictator of China. He can do entirely what he likes. We need not follow his lead. And I'd like to say, be very careful of what Dr. Tedros is saying, because if you listen to what Dr. Tedros is saying, he's saying exactly what Dr. Xi Jinping wants him to say. And in the first round, they wanted COVID to spread across the world, and it happened. Now, they probably want the entire world to follow and have lockdowns and stop work and create tremendous economic chaos. I think that is something which expert doctors like Dr. Bagai and others and the vaccine manufacturers we have will ensure does not happen, apart from the fact that Prime Minister Modi was very sensible. He allowed Indians to have herd immunity. Now we have that herd immunity. Mr. Xi Jinping did not allow the Chinese to step out of their homes. They don't have any herd immunity at all. And as a consequence, they have become very sadly, horribly vulnerable to this new variant of the virus.
Okay, let me take that to, Sanjeev Bagai as well, because Sanjeev Bagai, the fact, of course, is that, there is no accountability for China. There has not been since 2020. And, many believe that they will not be even looking at this fresh wave and their lack of transparency and obviously further blunders that they keep doing.
Good evening, everyone. I think the entire edifice in the last 2.5 to 3 years of China during the COVID period is based on a false narrative. They are serial track records of being liars. It's an opaque society. It's evil to its own citizens. So I don't expect much from them to do good for the world. I think if there's a time in which the world needs to have a collaborative moral decision to isolate China, it is now. We've been banged first time by them. I don't think we should allow it the second time. But having said that, first let's approach what's happening in China. They began with a virus of unknown origin. Only they know where it came from. They never allowed an inquiry. They allowed a substandard vaccine of efficacy less than 50% to slip through the doors. All the countries which imported it had to return it and had to then re-procure the other vaccines of mRNA worldwide. With the new Omicron sublineages, which are basically XBB or BF.7 or CH.1, or indeed what we call as BQ 1.1, they have a huge immune escape mechanism. So they defy the previous infections, what we call as hybrid immunity. They work through your monoclonal antibodies and other drugs. So the population now is subjected to a vaccine which never worked. Vaccine, if it worked, has slipped, and a highly vulnerable, hugely unvaccinated or partially vaccinated, elderly comorbids with no boosters, with sudden removal of restrictions. It's like throwing infants into a pool full of sharks. It is extremely unfortunate that the Chinese citizens have to be subjected to this, and I think they will be actually cursing why they were born in that country. Coming to India, I think India is in a good position. It's in a strong position. And the reason I say this is because our COVID protocols were decided by scientists and doctors and brilliantly implemented by the government. Full credit to Mr. Modi, full credit to every state, every chief minister. The lockdown was appropriate, it was accurate, it was scientifically tempered. Our vaccines, both Covaxin and Covishield, and I must add over here, Covishield, people tried world over their best trying to obstruct it, but it has proved to be very good. We also have now the intranasal vaccine, which is now approved. We are in a good position. The more than 90% of the adult eligible population have been vaccinated. We have to push the boosters, and now with the intranasal, and the other newer vaccines coming in like bivalent, I think we need to push that as far as we are concerned. But I think there should be no panic, there should be no alarm. Coming to China, as far as what the world should do, if the world doesn't do anything now, then it's goodbye to a lot of citizens. US is suffering, Japan is suffering, a lot of countries in European Union are suffering. If there is any moment in the history of the world where it needs to show some courage, some conviction, some collaboration in which they can take on China, which are actually paper tigers, it's now.
Yes, indeed. Let me, in fact, take that to Sanjeev Srivastava as well. Sanjeev Srivastava, of course, your take on, of course, when China will be brought to book, how much further devastation will happen in the world because of that? Okay, it seems he still cannot hear me. Let me bring in Deepak Vora once again on the discussion. Deepak Vora, the fact obviously is that China's policies have failed. Their zero COVID policy has wrecked their economy, has obviously affected the world negatively too. Their COVID prevention policies have failed since the start of 2020, and now they're lifting these measures too quickly and in an extremely unscientific manner, which is what is causing this rapid spread of infections, which is not just going to be contained to China, but is already spreading world over.
Despite all our warts and weaknesses, the democratic system has tremendous advantages. This government has shown it again. There is discussion, there is debate, whether in parliament people say things which you may or may not agree with, but it keeps the government on its toes. So we have the best doctors and scientists in the world. One of them is on your panel, Dr. Sanjeev Bagai. The government listened to them. All the wisdom is not in the head of any one individual. It was a collective decision that we will do this. We realize, sir, that lockdowns do not work, so the decision was taken that there would be no lockdown. We realize that COVID-appropriate behavior is what is needed, so we are recommending that. We said there should be a booster dose for the vaccines, which were given the best in the world, again, made in India. We are doing that. What went wrong in China, if you give me a minute more, sir? Dingling will go down in history as the most reviled Chinese leader because the virus is multiplying faster than you can say, Deepak Vora. First, bad leadership. He's sidelined his scientists and epidemiologists. Bad policies, such as frequent lockdown. Bad vaccines. Hubris that prevented him from permitting imports of vaccines since Chinese vaccines are duds. Bad system that stifles debate and dissent, and all wisdom flows from top down. Bad everything. Let me just tell, quote, a person I know well, former Mongolian president, Sakyajin Eldrog, who's met ping pong 30 times. He wrote a year ago, sir, she demonstrates, as many in history have before him, that it is possible to be charismatic in person and dangerous and autocratic on the world stage. He can be evil. Sir, the world sees his evil aspect. And please note that despite all this nonsense about BRI and its predatory loans and win-win nonsense, sir, to the best of my knowledge, not one country has expressed sympathy with China's present predicament, whereas dozens supported us when we were going through a very difficult time. I don't believe in Schadenfreude, which is epicaricy, celebrating or being happy because your neighbor is in trouble. China did that, comparing the fires in our crematoria to their rocket going up in space. We don't do it. We're a very good people. But really, sir, may I just say that the Communist Party of China, Professor Nalapat, Mr. Srivastava, is well past its expiry date.
Okay, let me also, in fact, quickly take that back to Dr. Sanjeev Bagai. Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, should flight restrictions be considered currently? What needs to be the way the world deals with this new wave in China? Frightening pictures continue to come out. They're worrying many. Governments, including the Indian government, are relooking at COVID protocols. What should be the policy moving forward?
Okay, so again, just medically, scientifically speaking, any person who's had a past history in the last 30 days, not in the last 7 days or 10 days, last 30 days to China, should first be tested before he can go through immigration. That's the first point. Point number two, any country which has what we call as a hot zone, certain parts in US and other places should have a negative RT-PCR before they board the flight coming into the Indian subcontinent. I think these kind of simple advisories should be in vogue for the next 60 days. Normally, a cycle of this kind of a virus takes about 4 to 6 weeks, if at all has to spread. I dare say there will be a trickle of these cases, but there is no need to get worried or panicked or anxious. We are in a good position as far as the vaccine protection is concerned. Even the 2 doses and some population getting the 3rd dose is going to prevent us, not as well as the original strain, but it is still giving a good amount of protection. And a very important point is our lockdown was very metered. The lockdown served its purpose to get its medical infrastructure and the political governance correct. And then the lockdown was removed. What it has done is it has given enough time for the Indian entire population to get a very, very good community-acquired immunity, what we call as herd immunity. There is also a medical known concept of what we call as cross-neutralizing immunity, that other viral infections also give us added protection as a collateral to and against COVID. Unfortunately, China never had that advantage because the population, not as one family, 5 families, 10 families, an entire province, an entire country was under lockdown. So I think India is in a good position. We need to focus on masking. Simple protocols, I always say, it's better to wear a 50 rupee N95 mask than to have a long tube down your throat being ventilated in the ICU. Prevention is always better than cure, and to be fully prepared, we should expect and be prepared for every and any eventuality, but pray for the best. I think Indian scientists, Indian government has done well. The Indian bureaucrats have done brilliantly. There is no vaccine campaign in the world which has been faster, safer, and more scientifically accurate than the Indian vaccine program.
Professor Nalapat, let me quickly draw you back in here, because the fact obviously is that yes, we must keep our guard up, and that's the way to deal with this menace, this new variant which is emerging from China, because there is lack of genome sequencing information coming out, lack of transparency as always from the Chinese. But the UN and the WHO have not been able to do much. Who then will hold China accountable?
Well, eventually, unfortunately, the UN cannot do it because China is a veto-wielding member. It will eventually be the Chinese people, and no one else has the power to do it. I'm here in Mumbai, Uday, and in Mumbai, that they are reasonably strict about the restriction that even if you're sitting in the rear seat, you have to put on your seat belt. You saw what happened, very unfortunately, to a very dynamic industrialist, Cyrus Mistry, and his friend, and as a consequence of the not wearing seat belts. So now that's being enforced. The point is that, frankly, I never even really could properly, get around the fact that there are seat belts in the back of the car. Today, because I'm in Mumbai, I checked, yes, there is a seat belt, I put it on. Now, in the same way as Dr. Bagai is saying, please have a good N95 mask, observe certain elementary protocols, and especially if you are in some groups that have got higher risk, be a little more careful. That's it. You don't have to shut down life for that, the way Xi Jinping did in China. And because it was a very painful thing that harmed China, I think you'll have a lot of individuals, evangelists, trying to export that model to different other parts of the world. So the point is, as correctly been said by our expert doctor, be alert, observe certain safety protocols, but please don't allow this panic to ruin your life or to ruin your livelihood.
Yes, absolutely. Let me take that to Sanjeev Srivastava as well. I'm being told he's finally with us now. Sanjeev, are you able to hear me this time?
Yeah, very much,
okay.
Very much.
Sanjeev, on of course this new variant in China, the alarm it's caused, on how to deal with it, and also the frustration that many are feeling, knowing that China will not be brought to book, will not ever pay the price for its mistakes.
Well, the first of all, I think we should not panic. This is first thing. Second thing is that the basic protocols, what is required to be, followed, must be followed by everyone, such as wearing mask, maintain some social distancing, and also, the guidelines which are being issued by the IMA and other, medical fraternity should be followed. As Dr. Bagai made some very, very insightful observations in that regard. I think that should always be kept in mind. I must say that we are in a much better position. Our vaccines are working very fine, and they are the best, one of the best vaccines invented in the world. Obviously, when it comes to the question of Chinese vaccines, they are not working fine. That's a fact. And also in China, there has been a very poor, vaccination drives too, that has led to this situation. But the crime which has been committed by the Chinese Communist Party and the dictatorial rule of Xi Jinping is that he has tried to cover up this entire weakness of Chinese medical system by enforcing a barbaric, zero COVID policy. And that was a kind of a crime which has again committed by Chinese, Communist Party, and the same kind of crime they had committed in 2019 when they informed about this corona virus to the world very, very late. According to the international health regulations, if a country is having a very serious virus which can cause a pandemic, then it is the responsibility of the country to inform the WHO about that virus within 24 hours. But China took around 2 months to inform this inform about this virus to WHO, and that's a crime. And I think China must pay for this kind of a crime. If WHO would have performed well, certainly China would have been held accountable. But unfortunately, I must say that WHO has not played its role properly. It was WHO's responsibility also to carry out a very, very honest investigation, but so far WHO has not succeeded. Obviously, China has tried to put a lot of hurdles before the WHO's investigations. That is the fact. But WHO has not performed well. I think international organizations have also been somewhat influenced by the Chinese various negative designs. As President Donald Trump used to say, and he came out, in fact, he stopped all funding to WHO, blaming that this is very heavily influenced by China. And Dr. Tedros or the other WHO officials, the way they were having meetings before the start of this corona pandemic, it raises a lot of questions and concerns. But having said that, I think the people of China, they are suffering. And that's, I think they are the significant part of humanity. So I have full sympathy for the people of China. And I think at this point of time, it is the responsibility of the international community. And also we are very integral part of and responsible part of this entire international community. We are G20 president at this point of time. I think it becomes the responsibility of the international community, including India, to do as much as we can help the people of China. And if Chinese government urges for some help with regard to the vaccines, I have been of the view that we must provide that help to the people of China. Certainly, the crime has been committed by the Chinese Communist Party and the authoritarian regime of Xi Jinping. But if Chinese people require the help of international community, I think we should proactively look forward to provide that help.
All right, let's leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this discussion.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.